Attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for attending Discovering Client Resources in Session and What to Do with Them. I'm your host, Denise Marshall, and I'm the Business Development Manager over here at Therapy Sites, and we are really honored to be here with all of you today. We want to give a special welcome to our guest speaker, Elliott Connie, and I'd like to personally welcome each and every one of you to this free educational event. During the next 60 minutes, Elliott will demonstrate how to appropriately find resources, and make them an effective part of the session. At the end of the webinar, we will do a quick word about therapy sites, then we'll have a live Q&A session. So if you could please take a quick moment and look at the GoToWebinar control panel. On there, you'll notice a questions tab. At any time you have any questions during today's session, please type those into the questions tab and we'll answer as many of those as we can at the end. Also, after the webinar, there will be a quick survey to give your feedback. We'd really love to hear your thoughts. With that said, let's meet our presenter, Elliott Connie. Elliott is a psychotherapist that practices in Keller, Texas, and he is also the founder and the owner of the Connie Institute and the Uptown Counseling and Family Therapy Center in Dallas, Texas. He has worked with thousands of couples and families applying the solution-focused approach to help them move their lives from their current problems towards their desired futures. So now I know we're all really looking forward to hear from him. So without further ado, take it away, Elliott.
Thank you, and I'm excited to be here. And as usual with webinars and trainings that I do, I'm going to try to feature some video because of the nature of webinars. I just want to make sure that the sound works. So if anybody out there in cyberspace is having a difficult time hearing the sound, just let us know. Usually it works out pretty good. I have the volume way up and do some things. So I'm excited and ready to go. So before we get started, I just want to say a few words about this particular training topic, why I think it's important, and how we're going to be going about this material today. When I started learning solution-focused brief therapy, one of the very first things I learned about this approach is the use of what we call exceptions. And if you're not familiar with that term, don't worry, we'll go over it a little bit later. But exceptions are essentially times when a problem doesn't happen for one reason or another. And that just made a ton of sense to me when I was learning to be a psychotherapist all those years ago and learning to work with clients. This idea of exceptions being clues to future successes. So, for example, clients have a tendency to talk to us using kind of extreme language. They'll say things like, I've always been depressed, but it turns out that there was a time in your life where the depression wasn't there, and in solution-focused brief therapy, we call that exceptions. And it's really important when you're doing solution-focused work to understand how to identify exceptions, and then subsequently, what do you do when you identify an exception? Like, how do you use that exception in therapy? And, I got really, really focused on these types of things, and I just spent this past weekend speaking at a conference in Austin, Texas, with one of my closest colleagues and friends, a guy by the name of Dr. Adam Frower. And Adam and I share a passion for teaching solution-focused brief therapy and also very particularly how to do it. Now, as we talk to new learners of solution-focused brief therapy or students of solution-focused brief therapy, we notice that people don't fully understand how to apply these ideas in session, even though they might have a full conceptualization of the idea. In solution-focused brief therapy, language is really, really important. The language you use in session matters. In fact, it matters quite a bit. And the way that you invite clients via your language matters. And in fact, it matters quite a bit. People always ask us things like, if you're not talking about the problem, how do you ensure your clients feel heard? Well, the answer to that question is we make sure we stick to the client's language as we're doing solution-focused brief therapy. We make sure the client understands that we're adopting their verbiage and we're letting them teach us how to be their therapist. An example of what I mean is, if a client walks into your office and says, I've always been depressed, and you say, tell me about a time when you haven't been depressed, there's a disconnect between what the client said and what you said next, right? So if someone says they've always been depressed, we have to articulate our next statement as if we've accepted what they've said, but yet have a question about it. If someone says, I've always been depressed, and I say, well, tell me about a time when you haven't been depressed, do you see how I'm not really listening to you? Do you see how I don't believe your response? But instead, we have to make statements like, so you've always been depressed, okay. So if I had a videotape of your life, your entire life, and I sat and watched it, at what points in your life would I find it hardest to notice the symptoms of depression? Do you see how that statement does not challenge the client in the same way, does not articulate to the client that I don't believe you, does not articulate to the client in some way that I don't accept what you're saying? And Adam and I got really, really focused on teaching people not just what these ideas are, but also how to identify them in session and then what to do with it, because to us, this idea of resources is really, really important. I often hear people describe solution-focused brief therapy as a strength-based approach. And, there are lots of strength-based approaches. CBT would identify themselves as a strength-based approach, and narrative and so on and so on. But we have this idea, there's a difference to us between the idea of strengths and the idea of resources. And today's chat will be about how to identify client resources and how to identify client strengths. So just a quick review of the solution-focused approach, the 5 guiding principles of SFBT. The first one, if something's not broken, don't fix it. Steve used to say that it would be absurd to work on a problem that the client hasn't told you they had. So it's really important that we stick to the language associated with what the client is saying they want changed. Next, if something is found to be working, we should do more of it. Now, the reason why I find it important to review this material is because oftentimes people hear these things, and in particularly this particular tenet, and they think that it's more prescriptive. So if a client tells you that when I go to school I'm not depressed, then we have a tendency to say things like, well, don't do those things more often. But in our way of working, we want to make sure we are inviting people into change instead of commanding or even prescribing them towards change. So if someone says, the only time I don't experience depression is when I'm with my best friend, instead of saying, well, hang out with your best friend more, we say things like, well, what is it about your best friend that makes the depression harder to show up? And then whatever their responses are, we build further future-focused questions around those things. So things like, so let's say you woke up tomorrow and all of those things that happen when you're around your best friend are in your life, except the best friend's not there. Just somehow the side effects of the best friend being there are present, but the best friend is not there. As you went about your day, how would you know that you were having these side effects instead of the depression? So we want to make sure we're inviting people towards things because we want them to think. And when we make prescriptions, clients are not thinking. And the language of solution development is different than the language needed to describe a problem. Never ever forget that solution focused does not mean problem phobic. So when we sit down with a client, the very first thing we do is we want to guide the conversation towards the solution. And I was just talking to somebody while I was at the AAMFT conference in Austin this past weekend, and one of the attendees asked me, what do I think of the name Solution-Focused Therapy? And to be honest with you, I'm not a big fan of the name Solution-Focused Brief Therapy. I think it kind of leads us in a different way a little bit. See, the word solution became a part of our dialogue because when Steve DeShazer was developing these ideas in the 70s, Jay Haley had just written his groundbreaking book, which I actually have here in my office, called Problem-Solving Therapy. Well, Steve wanted it very clear that solution-focused brief therapy was different than problem-solving therapy. So obviously the opposite of problem to him was solution. So here we go, solution-focused brief therapy. And then the reason I don't like the word brief is in our current landscape of psychotherapy, of mental health, the word brief has taken on a new definition because managed care companies have gotten a hold of it. So brief has a tendency now to mean, 3 sessions or less, or, kind of therapy as fast as you can kind of stuff. But when the word brief was originally developed by the guys in Palo Alto, California at the Mental Research Institute, back then psychoanalysis and psychotherapy were the same. They were identical. And they wanted they wanted to make sure that their model was different than what was commonly accepted as psychotherapy in that day, which was psychoanalysis, which is about 2 to 3 sessions a week for 3 to 5 years. And brief originally meant not that, right? Just not that type of therapy. And really what it means is the client is in charge of the number of sessions. And we want to use language that kind of honor this process. So when we sit down with a client, the very first thing we do is we're going to start building conversations that lead towards change as opposed to understanding or identifying a problem. And then no exceptions or no problems happen all of the time. There are always exceptions. And this is really important, especially for this training, because we're going to spend almost all of our time talking about exceptions, what to do with it, and how we actually do it. And exceptions, again, are those times when the problem does not occur, or somehow the client does something different than the problem. I saw a client a couple weeks ago who was coming to see me because he struggled with abusing alcohol. And as he was talking to me, he said that he had drank less this week. And understanding the idea of exceptions, I asked him how he managed to do that. One very important component of exceptions is never attribute the change to coincidence. The change must have happened because you did something to bring about said change. So I asked him how he managed to do that. And after some time of thought, he said that they were doing construction around his home, which caused him to take a different route to the office. And by taking a different route to the office, he didn't pass the bars and thus didn't start thinking about stopping at the bars on the way home. So multiple times this week, he was able to not stop at bars on the way home because they weren't on his mind. So he was able to understand that because this exception happened, it wasn't a coincidence, and he could enact a change to keep alcohol off of his mind, and that gave us something to build upon in the actual session. And then lastly, the future is creatable. That's the greatest thing about the future is we can do something today to have a significant and long-term impact on our tomorrows. So today is not static, and tomorrow is not guaranteed. We can actually do things to impact change. And this is so important because clients come into therapy very frequently, again, using extreme language. They say things like, I'm always going to be depressed, I'm always going to have this problem, I'm always going to have that problem. But the simple truth is change is just a decision or action away. One of my mentors, a guy by the name of Bill O'Hanlon, most people know Bill, he's written so many books in our field, nearly 40, but Bill likes to say, do one thing different, because once you do one thing different, then change is almost a guarantee. It kind of has to happen. Now, principles for doing this work is we have to believe that every client has resources. So again, this training being about resources, you must have the belief that all of your clients come into your session bringing their resources with them. People often ask me, like, what do you do if a client can't answer your questions or is not ready for change or refuses to talk? That would be me not believing in them having the resources and capacity for change. I simply would not allow myself to hold such a belief. If a client is sitting in front of me, I owe them the basic principle of optimism. I owe them to believe that they can change. Now, I'm not saying that change is easy. I'm not saying that change is going to be accomplished tomorrow, but I have to believe in their ability to change. Because once I do that, then their ability to work with me as a client goes way, way up. And it's very, very important that we hold on to a client's ability to be resourceful. And secondly, we have to understand that a solution-focused conversation is a co-constructed conversation. So it's something that happens in real time that gets developed one utterance at a time. I ask a question, the client gives a response, and I ask another question based on that response. That is the way that a solution-focused conversation goes. And then every person must take a turn. As I'm frequently asked, people will say to me, like, what do you do if a client doesn't talk? Well, I wait for them to take their turn, and if I have to wait 30 minutes, I will wait 30 minutes. But because this is a co-constructed conversation, clients must indeed take their turn. And the beauty is in the details. So we're going to ask people to do what we do with beautiful things. We're going to focus on them. So as people start to articulate their wonderful resources, we're going to ask people to focus on them so that they can experience the positive experience of being, bathing in your positivity. And we're going to carefully select which part of the client's responses we're going to be curious about. Solution-focused brief therapy is about curiosity, not nosiness. So I have to be very, very careful on which part of the client responses I use in the development of my questions and which parts I don't. one of the things that people used to say to me in the early days of me applying this approach is they would say, I don't like solution-focused therapy because you ignore your clients. Well, I promise, I'm not ignoring anything and I'm not avoiding the problem. I'm just being very, very careful on what parts I use in my questions and what parts I don't. And the parts I do use are going to be based on the client's exact language. One of the ways that you ensure that you're listening to someone is you use their phrasing in your questions exactly. Now, I think we have a poll question here. Is that right, guys?
Yes, let's go ahead and do this quick poll to hear from you. Thank you, Elliott. I'm going to get this launched. We are curious, how do you rate yourself on solution-focused therapy on a scale of 1 to 5, with 5 being the highest? And I just want to give a special thank you to Elliott and to everyone for joining us here today. At Therapy Sites, we specialize in websites designed specifically for mental health professionals, and we are really honored to be here with all of you today, and even more excited to have Elliott here with us sharing his expertise. Now, it looks like the poll is wrapping up here, so I'm going to hand this back over to Elliott.
Thank you.
Yes, so Elliott, I'm not sure if you can see the results, but it looks like a majority of the attendees are choosing the 3 range, so they're right in the middle of their comfort zone.
Cool. Well, I want to hurry and get to the part where I'm actually showing you the way we do this in session. So I'm going to be really quick and show you the breakdown of a solution-focused session. The first thing we do is we start with kind of a destination for our conversation. We steer away from the word goal. Our preference is use the word hope because goal tends to be very static, and we want people to experience flexibility in talking with us. So one of the first things we do with a client is we say, what are your best hopes from our talking? This is a departure from the most commonly asked first question, which is what brings you to therapy today. But if we start off with that question, then we're immediately going to get ourselves kind of wading through the problem. And next is resource talk, which we'll go thoroughly through here in a moment, and a preferred future description, which is really what solution-focused brief therapy is known for. Most people that are even minimally aware of the solution-focused approach would talk about their knowledge of the miracle question. And I've even heard people tell me, people who just use it a little bit in their work, they say things like, you know, I love solution-focused therapy. I use the miracle question to set goals for my clients. But for us, the preferred future description is the meat of the session. Like, this is the process of change. And when I was originally taught this approach, I went to a workshop that was conducted by a very well-known, recognized solution-focused person who said the very first thing you should do in session is ask the miracle question. Well, we have departed from that these days because, in our opinion, there are 2 things that have to happen first. Number 1, we have to figure out where the client is going, so what they would like, their best hopes for change, what their outcome should be. And number 2, we want to know the client's resources. So A, what outcome would you like to have accomplished? And B, what resource do you have available to you to accomplish those outcomes? And then we will ask the preferred future question. Noticing the difference, so in parentheses there you see noticing differences, because very, very frequently I will ask, what difference would that make for you? Would you be pleased by that? That sort of thing. And then the way we wrap up a session is with feedback and suggestions, which we're probably not going to get to today. There's a lot of material out on the internet about that stuff. If you want to hear my thoughts about it, you can go to my YouTube channel, just do a search for Elliott Connie, because today we just have a brief amount of time, and we're going to spend most of our time talking about resource talk. Why is it doing that? There you go. So, first thing we do is this idea of best hopes. It starts with the end in mind. So we're so outcome driven. Somebody in Austin asked me about the name of solution-focused brief therapy. When I was talking to them about that, they asked me what would I name it instead. And if I had the choice, I would call it outcome amplification therapy, because that's really what we're doing. We're identifying an outcome and then amplifying as big as we can. And it provides us with a provisional contract for our work. So I agree to ask you questions about the presence of that outcome, and you agree to participate in that conversation. And that's the dynamic in a solution-focused conversation. Now, it must be led by the client. It must look forward. And I'll give you an example about that. Is very often clients come into therapy looking backwards. What are your best hopes from our talking? I want to get over this past problem that happened to me, right? I want to get over the fact that my husband had an affair or something like that. And we have to ask, a question to change past language into present focused language by saying, and if you noticed yourself getting over it in a way that was right for you, what would you begin to notice? So hopefully you see how that takes a past idea and makes it a future idea. We always assume the client has a good reason for being in therapy. Never ever forget that the decision and process to come to therapy is very, very hard. People really struggle with deciding to go to therapy and then subsequently walking into a therapist's door. It's easy for us to forget that and take that for granted because we do it multiple times a week as therapists. Like we walk into a therapist's office every day, but to the layperson, that's actually a big challenge. So we're going to assume that every client who walks into our office is there for a good reason and thus is motivated by something. That there's something in their life they'd like to have change, and our job is to ask questions that tap into that. And we're going to take the client very seriously. So no matter what the client says, I'm going to accept it as their reality and just build questions upon it. And does not require a problem description or even its recognition. Most people new to this approach find this quite challenging, but think about it in this context. In my opinion, solution-focused brief therapy makes more sense when you take it outside of the therapy room. So if somebody comes into my office and they say, I would like to change, like I had a gentleman in my office yesterday, I want to change the way I conduct myself as a husband. I don't need to know how poorly he's conducting himself as a husband today, as long as he can articulate to me the way he wants to conduct himself as a husband when he's at his very best. In the exact same way, again, if we remove it from the context of psychotherapy, if someone hires a personal trainer to help them get back into shape, the personal trainer doesn't need to know how you got out of shape in order to help you get back into shape. If the personal trainer sat down with this person and said, I'll happily help you, but first, can you please tell me how you got out of shape? We would experience that question as challenging. We would experience that question as intrusive. But in psychotherapy, somehow we ask those questions, and in solution-focused therapy, we're just going to stick to the outcome. Now, again, solution-focused does not mean problem-phobic. So if the client wants to tell us about the problem, we're going to listen, and we're going to listen really, really intently. But we don't have to ask investigatory questions about the client problem, because it's up to us what we amplify. So if I say, what are you best hope for talking, and the client says, I just need to tell you what happened, I'm absolutely going to say, well, I'd love to listen. And then after they tell me this very, very difficult story, I'm going to ask a question like, gosh, and how did you go through all of that and maintain just enough motivation for change that you would come talk to a psychotherapist? Do you see how that amplifies the client motivation and not necessarily the problem? And then solution-focused therapy is about the presence of something, not the absence of something. So the single most important word in solution-focused brief therapy is the word instead, because it turns problem data and problem language into present-focused language. So if a client says, I'm always depressed, we're going to ask, well, what would you like to be instead? And it's going to help turn that language into present-focused language. And it sounds like what your best hope from this session, from this meeting, from work together, from whatever, but you can't do anything else until this question is asked. Now, this is actually kind of hard for me showing video. What I like to do is show videotapes of real clients. And if you come to my trainings, I often have videos that I've gotten permission to share of real clients, because the only way to kind of learn how to do this is to observe it happening in real time. But I only have limited videos that I'll be able to disperse online in a media like this. So I want to use a session that was conducted by Adam, and if we have time, I'll show a little bit of a session done by me, but I want to use the session done by Dr. Adam Frower to kind of show you the way he was eliciting client resources. So the very first thing that he's got to do with his client is figure out what outcome the client wants from the therapy. So I'm going to play the first couple of minutes of it, and for some of you who are familiar with solution-focused therapy, this might seem like a refresher or like a review, but we can't talk about resources without first talking about what the client's best hopes are. So let's first see Adam work with this client to identify the best hopes, and then I'll talk a little bit about resources, and we'll show Adam kind of eliciting client resources, and then we'll go from there.
It's nice to meet you.
Hi.
Hi. What's your name?
Susie.
Susie. Nice to meet you. My name's Adam.
Nice to meet you.
Do you mind just telling me basically what your ideal outcome is today?
Well, I know I'm having some depression issues, and I also some anger issues, and I just recently moved to a new school, and so I feel really nervous about that, and I feel like I'm being outcasted just because it's a new school. It's, my junior year, and I don't really know how to deal with everything, and I just have outbursts, and I'm not happy, and I hold resentment towards my parents because I'm moved, and all my friends are somewhere else, so I don't know.
Okay, that's a lot. If we did a nice job here today, and you walked out of here and said that was really worthwhile, how would you know? What would we have done? What would we have done during the session to make it useful?
I think probably solutions to how to control how I'm feeling,
Okay.
and like if I do get depressed, what can I do to not feel that way, and how to control my outbursts, I think, and maybe see how I can mend things with my parents.
Okay. So if we had a conversation that led you to kind of thinking about brainstorming, okay, when I feel depressed, when I feel overwhelmed, what might I do? When I feel like my parents are kind of coming at me, how do I manage that? If we have that kind of conversation, you would say, okay, that was good. I'm glad I went.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I'm going to kind of do something strange for a minute.
Okay. So you notice the very first response she had was very much about the problem, was very much about the struggle she was having with her parents. And you saw Adam acknowledge the struggle by saying, that's a lot, and then ask a question to gear her towards the outcome by saying, and if we had a conversation that was helpful to you, what would you notice? And that's when they start talking about change. One of my favorite things I ever read was, if you want change, talk about change. If you want problems, talk about problems. So you watched Adam acknowledge that she has a problem, but yet introduce language that would gear the client towards talking about actual change. So now that Adam knows where the client is going, the next thought he has is, what resources are present within the client to help them get there? And this is why we refer to this as particularly resource talk. And it allows the client to maintain a real connection with the therapist. Now, I want to point out two words here: maintain and real. One of the things that often surprises people that are new to this approach is how quickly we get down to business. People often ask us, like, what about rapport and all those things? Well, to us, rapport is already built. Rapport is kind of built in to the therapy, and it's our job to conduct ourselves in such a way not to lose it. So in this particular case, this young lady has gifted Adam with rapport, so Adam's job is to conduct himself in such a way that he honors that gift. And it breaks the problem talk pattern. A lot of times, I've been doing this now for upwards of 10 years, and one of the things that surprises me is how often clients come into therapy prepared to tell you about the problem, not necessarily because they need to get it off their chest, or they need to, one of the most popular phrases we use in our field is process, like they need to process through it, but they tell us about the problem because they think we need to know. And Adam, you're going to watch him kind of put the problem aside and get to know the person. So this occurs early on in the conversation. And why this is very important is, if we spend time identifying instances, those are moments when the best hopes somehow mysteriously happen. And remember, we never treat that as a coincidence or exceptions or even survival and coping. As Adam is hearing those things, he's learning about the resources that are present within the client. Now, how we use these resources are two ways. Number one, it's going to teach Adam the direction with which to go in his questions. And number two, it's going to do something to the very client. Now, when someone engages in a conversation, and everybody who's listening to this, you can probably think of a personal example of this happening. What happens if you call someone and they pull you into a very negative conversation? Maybe they're complaining about work, a boss, a boyfriend, a girlfriend, a husband, a wife, whatever it is. When you talk to that person, you can feel yourself sink. Like your very mood becomes impacted by the words you're using. Well, in solution-focused brief therapy, the exact opposite happens. If I'm engaged in a conversations with someone about how amazing I am, about my past successes, I'm going to have a tendency to rise. And Adam is going to get to spend time in therapy, not only getting to know this young lady's strengths, but as a consequence of talking about her resources, in essence, she's going to become more resourceful in real time, just sitting there while she's doing the therapy. Well, I won't read this to you verbatim. This is one of my favorite quotes. I'm someone who loves to read, and as a consequence, I collect quotes along the way. And this is one of my favorites, which says, focusing on solutions immediately creates energy in our minds. Now, we know this is true. This is exactly why Monday at 4 p.m. and Friday at 4 p.m. are not the same 4 p.m.s. Because on Monday, you're thinking, gosh, I got 4 more days to deal with these crazy people I work with, meaning coworkers, not clients, by the way. And on Friday, you're thinking, I don't have to deal with my coworkers anymore. I get to go have fun with my boyfriend, girlfriend, friends, loved ones, whatever it is, to go off and have fun. And that's going to have a tendency to create energy. Have you guys ever had an experience where you wake up on Friday morning and you first thought you have is, I cannot wait to get off work and come home and slither myself back into this bed. Like, as soon as I get off work, I'm going to come home, climb back into bed, and take an 842-hour nap. But then, as soon as you get off work, someone you enjoy calls you and says, hey, we're all going to this place. Would you like to go? And now all of a sudden you're willing to go. Well, it's because your brain has rewarded your positive thought with energy, right? And the same thing happens in therapy. Now, during this time of the session, the clinician is working really hard because we're listening for signs of strength, evidence of resources, past successes, more details about what the client wants, and more details about what life was like before or without the problem. It's really, really important that we really remember that we went to school to learn to become a psychotherapist. It's our clients who are going to teach us how to be their psychotherapist. And you're going to listen in a moment to Adam asking very poignant questions and learn how to talk to this young lady. He's going to be learning in particularly language. Every client comes into your office using different language with which they describe their reality. You ever tried to talk to a teenager about their world? It's really hard to do because they're using a different language than the language of an adult. We have to let our clients teach us what language they use to describe their lives and their reality. As Steve used to say, if you don't talk to people about their exceptions and successes, they won't tell you because that's not what brought them into therapy. But yet, as therapists, that's the thing we're interested in because that's the vehicle that we're going to use to get ourselves from where we are to where we'd like to be. So there's another brief word about exceptions. There are times when the client kind of forgets that they have a problem, and when we focus on what we do instead of avoiding the problem, it leads towards more successes. And our job is to explore and amplify these times and let the client participate in the choosing of experiencing those times even more. So I'm going to go back to this video of Adam, pick up where we left off, and now that we know a little about exceptions, watch the dynamic that takes place between him and his client as he's talking about the things that she's really good at. Now remember, this is not necessarily an assessment because I'm not assessing her for strength as if I don't think she has them, so I have to find them. We believe they're in there, so we're really just picking up language. They're going to teach us how to be her therapist throughout the rest of the conversation.
And then I'm going to kind of do something strange for a minute. If I take all that and I just set it over here and say we're going to come back to it. But if I just want to take a minute to get to know you and who you are and those kind of things, you said you're Susie. Can you tell me how old you are?
I'm 17.
17?
Yeah. My mom and my dad are Latino parents.
Okay.
They migrated here when they were younger.
Where are they migrating from?
Mexico.
Mexico.
Yeah.
And have you ever been back to Mexico?
Yeah, I visit my grandparents sometimes when I go down there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Do you get to go very often?
When I was a lot younger, I did, but now that I'm older, I don't really have time, with sports and everything. Well, when I was playing sports and stuff, I didn't really have time because that took most of my time.
Okay. And what sports do you play?
I loved soccer, so I played soccer.
Okay. You're good?
Yes.
What position do you play?
I started when I was younger as forward, and as I got older, I moved to defense.
Okay. Do you have a preference?
I personally prefer midfield because I get to play both.
Yep.
So.
Okay, very good. And if I asked your teammates, would they say you were good?
I hope so.
Good. All right. And so, besides soccer, what else do you like to do?
I don't know. I I try to just focus on sports because that pretty much helps me with everything. But since I've moved, I haven't found anything that really helps me. So it's been really, really hard for me.
So when you moved, you kind of left soccer behind, and that's kind of contributing to what's going on.
Yeah.
When you were playing soccer, you said you used that, and that kind of helped you cope with things.
Yeah.
What was helpful? Why did that work?
I feel it was because I could let my aggression out.
Okay.
On the ball, you know, or
So just getting that energy out, that was good.
Yeah.
Okay. And did it matter if it was during practice or during a game? Would one help you more than another?
No, I think they both were equally helpful.
Okay. So just getting the energy out of that was good. Okay. And since you've
So I'm going to pause it for a second. I want to play a little bit more. But do you notice what Adam just did? He just identified an exception that she had that helped her overcome past problems. He asked the question, like, what was it about soccer? And she says, I got my energy out. So Adam now has made a resource, an exception to a problem, a part of this conversation. And he didn't have to prescribe it to her, and he didn't have to kind of like assess it out of her. Just out of the conversation came this exception that Adam now is aware of, and he's going to kind of store it in his memory bank, right? Now you'll notice Adam is not writing anything down. Adam and I both have a tendency not to write a whole lot of stuff down. Now, as therapists, we think it's just important that you hold on to these ideas. So if you have a memory like Adam, he's literally one of the smartest people I've ever met. Or if you're someone who needs to write things down like I had to do in the beginning of my career, write them down. But you must hold on to these ideas because you just watched an exception become a part of the conversation just like that.
moved, how long ago did you move, did you say?
I would say about 7 months ago.
7 months ago. And what's been going well since the move? Anything?
I don't know. It's hard. I don't have any friends. You know, I feel really alone, and like sometimes I can't talk to my parents about this just because they're like, no, you have to not show emotion. You have to keep your you know, like just you're fine. Like you don't have to worry about anything.
So their suggestions for how you should manage and cope is different than what you think might be helpful.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, have you ever been able to find a place of common ground where you say, they might get this if I say it this way, or has it always just been like, no, I can't figure that out?
It's always been I can't figure it out. They're just very against, you know, like therapy and all that kind of stuff. They say that everything needs to stay within the family and it's nobody else's business.
Yeah.
And we can handle it on our own.
Okay. So it's taken a lot for you to come today.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
And there, you just watched him. So one of the things that is a struggle, or not a struggle, but when I was learning this approach, people used to say, like, you know, solution-focused therapy is heavy on compliments. And I've always struggled with the word compliment because I'm not so sure that that's what I'm doing. So one of the reasons why it's really important that we understand the best hopes before we understand this idea of resource talk is what you just saw Adam do was something that we refer to as a true and positive statement. And true and positive statements are connected to the best hopes. So compliment is, you know, Adam could easily say, you know, I like your white pants, or I like your hair, or I like those glasses, or whatever he would say. But a true and positive statement is A, something that's connected to a personal trait you have, and B, related to the presence of the best hopes. And you just heard him give her a compliment by acknowledging that coming to, or give her a true and positive statement by acknowledging that coming here was difficult, but you did it. And you heard her accept this true and positive statement by saying yes. So now this client who walked into the office being super focused on the presence of a problem, this person is now becoming more resourceful. And it's going to allow Adam to do two really, really important things. Number one, he gets to talk to her about her miracle using the ideas and words that he learned from her. So when people ask us, where does the miracle question come from? It comes from the client. So Adam has now learned a lot about the resources within this client. And number two, the client is changing with every single utterance. And just like I said earlier, if you guys call somebody and just have a super negative conversation, it is going to have an impact on your mood. Well, the same thing is true for us in solution-focused brief therapy, but on the positive sense. If I have a very positive conversation with somebody, it's going to impact our mood. So, are we at the questions part now, right?
Yes, thank you, Elliott, and thank you for sharing that great information. In just a few minutes, we are going to be doing a live Q&A session, so please stay around for that. And on behalf of Therapy Sites, we just want to give a special thanks to all of you for being here today. And we want to help all of you win with a website that is catered to the mental health industry and packed with all of the tools that are needed for an effective online presence. Therapy Sites specializes in websites and online marketing solutions specifically for therapists. And for the first 20 people to contact us, we are going to set you up with a website for 2 months free and 6 months free with Psychology Today. Combined, that's a $300 savings. Absolutely no risk, no contracts, no setup fees. It's all yours. It's such a great opportunity to test drive an effective online presence for 2 months to see how it really works for you and works for your practice. Give us a call at 866-288-2771, or you can email me at webinar@therapysites.com, and we'll get you set up so that you are in that top 20. Elliott, do you mind switching to that next slide for me, please?
No, I do not.
And right out of the gate, you are getting a site that is streamlined to your practice. In addition to hosting and your own domain name, the package includes an e-newsletter that matches your website, an online scheduling calendar, a robust list of online articles. We're going to help you update your site regularly, and you're starting off with 10 pages of preloaded content. And for 2 months free, you really have nothing to lose. So do whatever you need to do to make sure you're in that top 20. Give us a call, send us an email. We really do love this stuff. Now, we do have a lot of questions coming in, so let's go ahead and turn over to those.
And
Elliott,
also before we take questions, I didn't mean to end so abruptly. I wasn't sure how the transition would go into the Q&A, so I just wanted to thank everybody, and I hope that I was able to articulate how important it is to find resources after you know what your client outcome is from therapy. And if you guys are interested in, so what would Adam have done next, just, well, you can find that video on my website, and if you have a hard time, I think I even have it on my YouTube channel, but excuse me, it's just really, really important that we are understanding on how to use client resources in session. So thank you guys for listening to me, and I'm happy to take whatever questions come in.
Yes, and actually, Elliott, that next slide has some contact information. So if anyone does have any questions for you or for Therapy Sites, we have ways to contact both parties up here on the screen, because I'm sure Elliott would be happy to answer any questions outside of the webinar for you as well.
Absolutely.
The first question for Elliott is from Jamie. How do you help the client to prepare for pitfalls in the future if you don't, or you may not know what may have created roadblocks from the past? So in other words, how does this change toward the future they want to become lasting, and how might you prevent client regression?
No. That's a brilliant question, and we think that that is a question not only that solution-focused therapists have to address, but it's a question for psychotherapists at large, because clients, obviously, they come to see us for an hour per week or every other week or whatever it is, and then they go off and live their lives, and they don't have, the therapist living their lives side by side with them, so they have to kind of get on with it on their own. But I will tell you that I used to do psychotherapy. My original training was in CBT, and one of the things that we would do was something called plan for barriers. But what we noticed was by planning for barriers, we're actually coaching our clients to anticipate them. And by anticipate them, they would experience more barriers. So in solution-focused brief therapy, we replaced that by just trusting our clients. because when people don't plan for barriers, they fall back on their resources if we've done a good job of helping them identify those resources, and then those barriers don't appear as often. And when they do appear, the client believes they have the ability to overcome them. So one of the ways that we prevent backslide is by reminding our clients that they don't have to backslide, by building them up to the point where when they experience a challenge, they fall back on their resources and realize they have everything they need within them to overcome such a challenge.
Thank you. I hope that answered your question, Jamie. And we have just a quick note from Erin. She wanted to say thank you. Always great to hear you and participate in your trainings.
Awesome, thank you.
Yes, absolutely. And the next one is from Janelle. Solution-focused therapy seems similar to motivational interviewing. Can I use them together?
In the past couple of years, I've had many people, in the past probably 2 years or so, I have visited probably 100, well, I haven't counted, but over 100 cities for sure, about 40 United States, and about 24 countries. And something I hear more often here recently is people saying that it's similar to motivational interviewing. So I cannot really answer the second part because I'm not familiar enough with motivational interviewing to know whether you can use them together or not. But I can tell you that I hear that very frequently, and the difference between solution-focused brief therapy and motivational interviewing is we believe that a client is motivated already. So we're going to talk to them as if they're motivated instead of doing things to address their ambivalence, which is what motivational interviewing does. Because I'm a little bit familiar with motivational interviewing, but I'm hesitant to say whether you can use them together or not, because I'm not, if we treat these like language, I'm very fluent in solution-focused brief therapy, but not as fluent in motivational interviewing. But my suggestion would be, give it a shot and see if it works for you. But I know a lot of people make that same comparison.
Okay, great. The next one is from Lou Ann. Since insurance companies are more focused on diagnosis and problems, how do you address that?
Well, excuse me, I was taking a drink. One of the ways that I personally address it is I do not work with insurance companies. I don't serve on any panels. But I recognize that some people do take insurance, and I may end up taking insurance at some point in my career as well. So what I would like to say to you is we're not saying that assessment and diagnosis are not important. We're simply saying that assessment and diagnosis are not a part of the treatment. So if someone walks into my office, and let's say I was filling out a treatment plan for an insurance provider, I would do an assessment and I would do a diagnosis, but I would just make sure the client knew that this was not part of the therapy. So in essence, I'd say, yeah, I have to do an assessment and diagnosis, and I'd ask problem-focused questions and assessment-type questions. Then when I got done, I'd put that aside and I'd say, okay, so what are your best hopes from our talking? So the client knew that there's a period of our conversation for assessment and a period of our conversation for treatment, and I wouldn't want to confuse them. And quite frankly, I wouldn't want to confuse myself either.
Okay, great. The next one is from Ellie. How do you address emotions in solution-focused therapy?
We attach actions to them. So if someone says, I'd wake up feeling happy, we would say, and when you're feeling happy, what do you have a tendency to do? Or if someone who knows you really well is standing next to you when you're feeling happy, what would they catch you doing? It is not accurate when people say that solution-focused therapy doesn't attend to emotions. We are emotional creatures, so emotions are very, very important. But we need to make emotions observable in order to have these sorts of conversations. And there's a good book that you might be interested in, written by a woman named Eve Lipchick, called Solution-Focused Brief Therapy, Beyond the Techniques. And in that book, she talks specifically about emotions, and she was probably the one most credited with making sure emotions remained a part of the solution-focused approach. Again, her name is Eve Lipchick, and her book is Beyond the Techniques. But to specifically answer your question, we would make sure we make the emotion observable in some way.
Okay, thank you. And this is a comment from Allison about the motivational interviewing. She says that it tends to have the provider in an expert stance, attempting to influence by Socratic questions the direction in which the therapist or the other experts wants the client to change, example, to stop drinking, and solution-focused brief therapy does not take this expert stance. Just wanted to share that comment she shared with us.
No, no, no. I would completely agree. Solution focused therapy does not take the expert stance, and I'm glad she chimed in because I'm just not as familiar with motivational interviewing as I am SFBT.
The next one is from Taryn. I worked in a shelter and it seemed that many times my clients had severe trauma with very limited supportive services. How do you utilize solution focused when it seems the client keeps hitting walls that are outside their control?
Okay, so you bring up the idea of trauma, and I am currently very, very interested in trauma. In fact, me along with a few coworkers are working on a book, right? Not coworkers, co-authors, working on a book about using solution-focused brief therapy in trauma. And remember, you have to believe that every single client has resources and the capability of change. Now, sometimes there are things happening outside of their control that are impacting their ability to experience life the way they'd like to, but we can still make our lives better because we still have autonomy over our current circumstance. So solution-focused brief therapy is actually a very appropriate approach for crisis and trauma. In fact, there's a lot of research to support it. So we would do the exact same thing. We would just ask clients what their best hopes are and figure out what resources they have available to them with the understanding that some things are more challenging because of outside circumstances, and then spend time having them describe the presence of those best hopes via preferred future questions.
Great. Thank you. And we do have a little bit more time. Oh, here's another one that came in. It's from Dina. How could I use SFBT with a mentally ill client who has OCD and schizophrenia?
Well, you would do it the exact same way. Like to us, the problem doesn't do anything to dictate change in the approach. So I've worked with many people who struggle with OCD tendencies or schizophrenia, and if this wasn't such a public forum, I actually have a videotape of me working with a client who was diagnosed with schizophrenia, and I would love to show it, but I can't because of the public nature of this forum. But I can just tell you that we have to ask our clients what their best hopes are, and we have to spend time understanding their resources, and then we have to spend time talking to them about their preferred future, regardless of what problem brought them into therapy. And by doing that, change becomes more possible for all clients. And this approach is about trust. You have to trust the process and trust your client's capability of change.
Okay. We have actually, regarding the same topic, Erin just chimed in. She has a current client with OCD and schizophrenia, and they always are able to answer the question about best hopes, and it informs every session.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
The next question is actually about therapy sites, and they are curious how to take advantage of the 2-month free offer. And it's very simple. Just email us at webinar@therapysites.com or give us a call at 866-288-2771. We're really looking forward to setting you up with a website that's created for your industry. So please give us a call and take advantage of that 2 months free. Now, we do have about 5-6 more minutes remaining for any questions that you do have. We're going to stick around for a minute or two. And any questions that you have, please type those in and we'll be sure to answer those for you. I don't know, Elliott, if you have any stories you want to share or questions that often get asked.
Man, I'm like an old grandpa. I always have a story to tell about one thing or another.
We just had, we had a couple come in. So
Okay.
from Rebecca, can you comment about this approach with children?
Yeah, using this approach with children, the thing I do most commonly is work with couples, but one of the things I enjoy almost as much is working with children because children have such an amazingly intact imagination. And I don't mean imagination as in creating something that is not real. I mean imagining something that is not currently happening. And children also are amazing truth tellers. And a few months ago, I had a family come to see me because of issues going on in the family. And when I asked the preferred future questions, the child is the one who said, my parents would stop cursing at each other. And that has led to a huge amount of change in this family. So remember, it's about trust. regardless of age or problem, I trust your ability to answer questions, and I trust your ability to describe the world you'd like to live in. And kids have such an intact ability to tell the truth and such an intact imagination that it makes psychotherapy so amazing to do with them. People ask me sometimes, like, what's the youngest I'll do? And if a client is young enough to articulate their world, if they're old enough to articulate their world, I'm perfectly happy to see them and do therapy.
Thank you. And we actually have quite a bit of questions coming in. This one is from Allison. How do we handle the client who has the yes, but attitude when we describe their resources and strengths in session?
We keep asking them questions because a lot of times clients will say, because remember, our job is to amplify. So if I say, what are your best tools when we're talking? And the client says, I'd like to be happy, but I don't think I ever can be. I would say, oh, so you want to be happy, right? So we would just put the but off to the side.
Great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
This one is from Angela. Does exploring resources last longer than one session before you go into the preferred future?
No, well, I suppose sometimes, but we would like that rubric that I showed earlier, the structure of a solution-focused session, we would like to get through that session in that structure in every session. So, and also you're going to learn more resources. I saw a client not too long ago. I've been seeing this client for about 2 months, and I learned something about her that was huge that I didn't know. She was a teenage girl, and in like the 8th session, she tells me that she's a black belt in Taekwondo. I had no idea. So this idea of listening for resources is ongoing because people's resources are infinite. I mean, human beings are amazing. Like, they really, really are remarkable. And we're going to be listening for resources the entire time we know them.
Great. This is from Cheryl. What do you do when the child is not telling the truth? The story the child is telling is dangerous and causes legal problems.
Well, a couple of things. Number one, we owe it to all of our clients to ensure safety. So if a client is telling us a story that is dangerous, it doesn't matter what type of therapy you're doing. You have to kind of adjourn therapy and make sure that that person is safe. Number two, if they're doing something that may cause legal consequences, like one time I saw a client and I said, what are your best tools for my therapy? And the client said, I want more money, more weed, and more, and then he used an expletive for women. Now, his parents were in the room, by the way, and if I can, in good conscience as a therapist, help this client get more money and more weed and more expletive for women, right? So I have to say things like, and suppose the state of Texas was represented by somebody in this room. What would you say was the thing you want that does not upset the state of Texas, which is where I live? And then his answer changed. It changed to something more appropriate. And eventually the answer he gave was he wants to live a life that his parents could be proud of. So in essence, we keep asking the question until we get a usable response.
Okay, good. This is from Eugenia. How long do you find your client in session with this solution-focused therapy? This type of approach does not seem to be as effective for some MH disorders. Do you find many of your clients with major issues?
Yes, I would dispute the idea that this approach is not effective with clients with major disorders. In fact, there's a tremendous amount of research that would support that it is effective. In fact, one of the strengths of solution-focused brief therapy is it seems to be unilaterally applicable. In every study ever done, solution-focused brief therapy, when it's compared to treatment as usual, has been as beneficial as the treatment is compared to, and always 100% of the time in fewer sessions. So if someone has a very serious mental health disorder, you can still conduct a solution-focused conversation with them, and they would still benefit. And according to research, they would benefit as much as treatment as usual. So I would dispute the idea that this approach doesn't work with big problems. And Stephen and Sue, Steve DeShazer and Sue Kimberg, when they were developing this approach in Milwaukee, they wanted to see the most troubling clients. They wanted to see the most difficult clients to demonstrate that this approach is effective, even with people having significant issues. And again, if any of you want to come to some of my training events, I will show you videotapes of me working with people who are very, very troubled, and you will see the way the change process happens, and they become more resourceful over their troubles.
Thank you, Elliott. And we are at the top of the hour, but we do have a few more questions that we would like to get answered. So if it's okay with you, Elliott, we'll stick around for a few more minutes to answer these questions.
Yep.
Perfect.
I'm happy to.
Awesome. Thank you. And keep rolling them in if you have any more questions. And we hope to hear from you at Therapy Sites as well to set you up with a website. The next one is from Taryn. Are there any directives that you give to clients outside of session to encourage focusing on the solution?
Not all the time. We didn't have a chance to get into it today because it wasn't the topic of our conversation, but at the end of the session, I will typically just ask people to notice the changes we've been discussing, or not give them any instruction at all. Usually, as we're going through the preferred future description, the client makes a decision to do something different, and I'd hate to give a suggestion that would get in the way of that decision. So most of the time, or I shouldn't say most of the time, it's not uncommon that I don't give any instruction at all. When I do give an instruction, it's usually just as simple as go notice the presence of those changes.
Okay, thank you. And we've had a couple of questions come in about what upcoming events that you have and that you're teaching and where they can find this information as well.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, so join my mailing list, which you can see there is at elliotspeaks.com. Make sure you spell my name with 2 L's and 2 T's, and you'll get emails with my upcoming events and things like that. The next event that I'm really excited about that I have having is I have a 4-day intensive training coming up in January that I'm going to be doing here in my local area, which is Fort Worth, Texas. And it's an international event. There are going to be people there from all over the world. We're only taking 25 people, and registration opened like a week ago, and the spots are already going. So if you're interested in doing this, act fast. But you can find my events if you go to elliotspeaks.com and join the mailing list. A lot of times my trainings are listed on the connieinstitute.com, and you'll get access to all those events as often as I have them.
Great. Thank you, Elliott. And just a couple more questions that we have. This one is from Wanda. Given your previous training in CBT, what sold you on SFBT? What is the greatest benefit in your opinion?
Wow, that's a really good question. So I don't mean to put down any approach. I mean, research is very, very clear. All psychotherapy works. But for me, solution-focused brief therapy fit better with my personality. In fact, I never felt very effective when I was doing cognitive behavioral therapy. And I want to be clear, I don't think it was the approach that wasn't working. It was me that wasn't working. I just didn't feel very effective. And I actually had made the decision that I was going to quit graduate school and leave the field because I just wasn't finding it, it wasn't a good fit for me. And when I learned solution-focused brief therapy, it honestly felt like someone was putting words to the things that were going on in my head. Solution-focused brief therapy is so logical, it's so simple, it just made so much sense that I couldn't ignore the strength of what I was learning. Now, I'll be honest, I was skeptical because it actually sounded too simple, and it sounded too, you know what I mean, like almost like too good to be true. So I made the active decision that I was going to use it in my work, and I was just going to see the way clients responded. And I always tell people that I've had the opportunity to be mentored by some of the best solution-focused minds all over the world, and they have done an amazing job of teaching me what to do, teaching me how to do it, but I can't be more thankful enough of the thousands of clients who have taught me to believe in it, because it's actually my clients answering my questions and my clients demonstrating amazing capabilities of change that taught me to trust solution-focused brief therapy.
Great. Thank you, Elliott. Now, it looks like we are down to the very last question, and we want to thank all of you for being here today. And we actually have maybe another question coming in. Let's see. How do you use solution focus for a child who is clearly being manipulated by one parent during a custody dispute?
Wow, it's funny. Were you in my office last night? All we can do as therapists is ask questions, or all we can do as therapists is apply our work. Now, sometimes, and it wouldn't matter what model I'm using, those are difficult settings to be in. last night I asked the parents to step out, and then I began to ask the kiddo to describe his world. And after about 5 minutes of questions, it turns out he doesn't want the world that his parents are coaching him to describe. And I'm probably going to have to go to court and describe to the court what this kid was saying in his responses. But the beautiful thing about solution focused questions is they're not challenging and they're inviting into the future. So people don't need their defensiveness. So this kid, he was coached on what to say, but the questions that these parents expected were a bunch of problem focused questions. When I started inviting this kid to talk about what he wanted for his life, the answers became very obvious that they weren't in line with what his parents wanted. And I'm going to go to court and advocate for this kiddo and change. So all you can do is confidently apply your approach and trust that the kiddo is going to get something out of it. And if they don't, sometimes client parents make it difficult for kids to benefit from therapy, and it doesn't really matter what your approach is in those types of scenarios.
Okay, great. Thank you, Elliott. And it looks like this is the last question that we are going to have time for today. But as you have up on the screen, reach out to Elliott himself if you do have any questions, and also reach out to us and take advantage of that 2 months free to get an effective online presence. Thank you all so much for being here today. The last question we have time for is from Dina. Are any certifications developed for CFBT?
CFBT?
Yes.
I assume they meant SFBT. Yes, so there are several actually. There's a diploma course over in London taught by my mentors, a gentleman by the name of Harvey Ratner, Chris Iveson, and Evan George. The Connie Institute offers a certificate program. We have an online course that starts on October 1st. It's already full, but we offer a certificate program as well. It's a 16-week, very intense training. See, our goal is to make sure that people are fluent in their ability to apply solution-focused brief therapy. So again, we're going to be launching that online course again next year. So if you want to be on it, go to mastersolutionfocusedbrieftherapy.com, and you can actually join the waiting list, and then you'll be the first ones given the opportunity to sign up the next time we offer it. And then be sure to join my mailing list because I'll constantly be announcing when these things come out. So those, in my opinion, are the two best places to get a certificate acknowledging that you've been through intensive training to do solution-focused brief therapy.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Elliott, and thank you so much for being here with us today. And actually, all of you, I do highly recommend joining his mailing list. I am a part of it, and I love the information that he shares with us. So that's something that we highly recommend. And thank you all for being here, and I hope you have a wonderful afternoon.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate it.
Bye.